the next story is the Shinagh Story to date. In Ireland, we would say in the last number of years, there's two very good demonstration farms. Greenfield's more widely known, and then you have the Shinagh Story, which is you don't hear as much about it because we'll say the independent Republic of West Cork tends to get about its business in a very strange way. We'll say that it has a, you heard from John yesterday, and John kind of changes around the usual. We said that man proposeth and God disposeth. Down in Shinnok, God, being Johnny Mac, propose it, but it's Kevin Ahern down on the ground who actually disposes it and actually does the job. So, but anyway, it's a very, very good story in terms of setting up a low-cost, grass-based, resilient, robust, low-risk system, for anybody will say that who is not familiar with it, in terms of farm notes on a week-by-week basis, they're the best I've seen in terms of being helpful to farmers. So I'm delighted, we'll say that instead of chairing a session, we've actually got God himself, Mr. McNamara, will say to tell us about Shinnok.
I think that, whatever you call it, sticker is stuck to you, Michael, not stuck to me, first of all. The second thing is, as someone that's very shy and retiring, that's why you don't hear a lot about the Shinagh Story. The third thing, which is way more important, the Positive Farmers put up a competition there earlier. Obviously, as chairman yesterday, I'm already, after getting the best chairman of the session, now I'm going for the double. And as a clear man, we don't get many opportunities to go for the double. So remember who you're putting down as this best speaker. Don't worry about the content, lads. That doesn't really matter. The other thing I should put up is a health warning. Most of what's written in the book is probably wrong, irrelevant. No, so you better watch as those slides going up and correct them as we're going along. We say to everyone that comes out to Shinnok, and Kevin Ahern will be answering the questions, and he's down. Just make sure he doesn't escape, because I do the talking. I'm the spokesperson on behalf of the three here. Let's be honest. I suppose Patrick French Moore Park is the driver, the brain behind this. I'm the talker, and Kevin Ahern is the person that does the job. We say to everyone that arrives into Shinnok below, this is your farm. Don't be at all afraid of asking us any awkward questions. If we have a problem with that, that's our problem. Yes, we'll clock you down as they're the most awkward people that ever come in here, but that's our problem. That's our problem. That's our problem. Because too often if you go into farms, and if the first question that's asked, the answer is very defensive, you just don't bother asking anymore. You say they're hiding something. Yes, we're probably hiding something, but if we are, we're doing it without us knowing it. So ask away when we come to the end. Michael, how long have I? About an hour and a half I'd need. All right, oh Jesus. I hate being rushed in. Anyway, I'm speaking on behalf of the three people up there. More important, the people that are supporting this project are the West Cork Co-ops, which are right across the top. So Carberry being the processor, and Bandon, Barry Road, Dreen and Lissavard, and the Department of Agriculture first day gave a licence for quota to go in there. For those of you that are not that are our friends from across the water, whether it's across the water or further south, you saw Brian McCarthy yesterday. We're near Bandon, which is in the southwest of Ireland, good grass going territory. We're matching sort of what Brian is doing on the non-clover pastures at around 15.5 tonne. So good ground. In general, good ground. As a chairman, I would think is excellent ground, good ground. Obviously, some parts are damp ground, but generally good ground. So I'll run through what I'm supposed to be doing. The presentation we'll do, what were the background principles, why was this demonstration farm set up, what are the farm details, just to update you about what exactly is there on the farm, what are our objectives, what are we trying to achieve there, what are the results to date, both in physical terms, some of the key performance indicators that we'd call it, and finally, have we learned any lessons? Now, as God, probably unlikely we're going to learn any lessons, but we might be humble enough to say what lessons we've got along the way. Background principles, it was set up to demonstrate the setting up and operation of a large dairy herd. I appreciate any from across the water, 200 cows is not a large dairy herd, but in our situation back in 2011, it was a large dairy herd, and it is still a large dairy herd, because as Fiona put up there, our average across the country is still 70 cows. To give confidence, I suppose, to other farmers looking in to do this, could you do it? Because could you show that you could make a return to the items Fiona was talking about? Could we give a return to land? We're renting all the land. Could we give a return to labour? We're paying all the labour. And sometimes it's an issue of mine when we see figures put up and there's no cost put in for family labour. Farms do not operate without a cost for family labour. If you're fully employed labour, it's always put in. If it's family labour, we should be putting in a cost for family labour. And then equally, if you're setting up a farm, there's capital involved, so could it make the repayments on the capital that was needed to set up that dairy operation? And then again, what we're finishing up with, what lessons have we learned out of it to date, and to make sure that information was given out. So farm governance structure, there's a company set up which is totally owned, totally co-op owned. It leased in a 78 hectare beef farm for 15 years and converted it. So it's a beef farm, there was a certain amount of slurry storage there was a certain amount of housing, and I'll go through that as I go along on the conversion costs. That company then contracted in Teagasc to project manage the conversion at the start and the operation of the farm. How that works is there's a 5-man board that sets the objectives and agrees the budgets and meets probably once every 2 months. So on that board then is sitting some of the co-op representatives, because they have equity in there. There's 2 co-op representatives. I'm sitting on it, Patrick French is sitting on it, and Kevin Ahern. So that's our 5-man board that makes, we'll call it, the strategic decisions going forward. And then on a day-to-day basis, who runs the farm or a week-to-week, Kevin Ahern manages the farm, manages labour, manages everything on it, and Kevin will be answering all questions about this in a minute. So we started converting in late 2010. First cows were milked in 2011. I suppose the big learning coming from Greenfield was you have to ring fence the money for your stock. So the stock are the most important. Well, I would say the manager is the most important, and next is the stock coming in. So quickly, and that's a good photograph because it's giving you an idea. It's generally good ground, it's on high ground, some of it is sloping ground, it's above the town of Bandon. In that photograph you're looking down on the town of Bandon. What came in was 200 heifers, and we can debate that at some stage. It was all heifers that came in. It was good for cell count, it was good for staff morale, it was bad for output in the first years. But half of those cows are still milked last year. So half of those cows were still around. You buy in the right cow. I won't go through with you because you're all doing it. You buy them on EBI. The objective was to get him 100 EBI. I think James O'Loughlin is somewhere in the audience. If he is, James O'Loughlin, Moore Park, Kilmaley, was the man mainly responsible for taking in those cows. Half it coming from fertility. The objective was, if you get a fertile cow, you have the ability to breed another heifer offer that you might like in the future. If you get in a cow and she gives you a big yield the first year and she doesn't go back and calf, she's no good to you, she's gone. So if you're bringing in cows, you really prioritise fertility. What happened coming in, half of them were black and white of some description, maybe full New Zealand Friesian out to full Holstein. A quarter of them were Jersey of some description, a sniff of Jersey out to about 78% Jersey, and the same with Norwegian Red. So of that 200 heifers that landed on the farm, as I said, half of them were milked last year. Housing, there was an old beef, what we call a mastock house, which was double slatted tank, a bad roof on it. That was converted for 175,000. Milk and parlour and every other bit of ancillary costs were thrown in there. So milk and parlour, yard, planner permission, electricity, all that type of thing is covered there in that 200,000. Grazing infrastructure, which included a certain amount of reseeding, water, fencing, roadways, is 100,000. Putting them all together, 70,000 for working capital. If you add all them together, you add in 70,000, you get to a total conversion cost of 820. Michael, now that I think of it, you promised an interpreter or a translator for me. So if any of you don't understand me, will you put your hand up? Will the people that don't understand me, I'm providing one-on-one sessions in the bar afterwards. They ran out of Middleton very rare last night for me, but Con is bringing on more today. Right? Okay. I think I'll slow down. Maybe slowing down would help the interpretation. Total conversion cost 820,000, of which we looked to get, as the company looked to borrow as much money as it could. That is the maximum we could borrow. 560,000 borrowed, around 2,500 a cow, and to get that amount, equity had to come in. So the co-ops or shareholders came in with 260,000 equity or 1120. So you can look at that whatever way you like now. You can look at it that it cost 3,600 to convert, including the cows, or it cost 2,500 of borrowings. So that's what it's cost to set it up. Farm operation then, how is it set up? So there's one farm manager, Kevin Ahern, who will be, as I said, Kevin, I keep reminding you, you're answering the questions. He runs all labour, so he runs that with relief part-time staff. Roughly maybe about 1.6, 1.7 labour units if you want to do it that way. All machinery work is contracted out because our saying is, if we have someone feeding silage and his tractor breaks down, we're very sorry. We really feel sorry for him. But we're not paying for that tractor to feed, he's to get a tractor for the following day. So, and it's easier probably to do this in a startup situation. In a startup situation, one, you can't have the risk of a lot of machinery because something happens to you, that's a big unknown in the budget. Secondly, we're not paying the like of Kevin enough, as you'll see in a minute, but if we have him sitting on top of a tractor, that is a very expensive piece of gear, with paying someone per hour to sit on top of a thing when we can outsource. So that's the thinking there. Contract rearing of heifers, we didn't contract rear them the first year because we couldn't really afford to do it. Plus, we had only heifers on the farm, so we had more grass available. We were able to push, we were able to keep the calves on. Once we were able to drive up stocking rate, get more mature cows, it made sense for us to contract rear out the heifers because we could make more money out of a hectare by having a cow on it than by having heifers on it. So even though it's a big cost, it's making sense for us to be contract rearing them out. Grass-based system, I had the word simple in front of it till last night, I took it out of it. Lads, we overdo this, it's simple. It's not, it's a skill set. We heard a lot about skill sets yesterday. It's an important skill. It's one of the key items of what's going to drive you a profit. So if you don't have the skills to do a grass-based system, you go out and learn them. Operational objectives, what were we setting out to do? We were setting out to grow a lot of grass. I'll go through this quickly enough because I'm talking to a converted audience. So you get your soil fertility right. You get your lime, P's and K's right. We've done that and we keep improving it. We go back in and we soil sample every 2 years and we keep correcting. You'll start to see that kicking in now on our grass growths when we look at them later. They have, at a steady start, they've now gradually increased. We did 15.5 tonne last year, super grass grown year on the farm. We're targeting doing the same again this year, allowing for weather conditions, and then maybe we can drive on from that again. Make sure you put in the grass varieties right, you put in the ones that are doing the job and are growing. You heard Fergal and Brian saying yesterday, there are some grasses out there, cows like to graze. They'll bring them down under 3 centimetres. There's other grasses there, you're struggling to get them to go down to 4.5. You have to have a different concept of looking at grasses. I'm coming from old advisory, even though I'm only in the job about 5 years. But, I've been listening to like a Murphy for too long, I have a headache. Our concept of before of grass, my concept was you looked down and you saw a dense pasture, and that's what you wanted. You looked for a sheep paddock. More and more we're learning cows struggle to graze out that type of paddock. So the compromise will be between having it too open, which is harder to not poach, but cows will graze to the butt, and having it too dense, which you do less poaching, but it's harder to get cows to graze out. Match the stocking rate to grass grown. I'll do very little in it because Donald Patton, who is a more technical person than me, Donald, I was brought up ahead of you to soften him up, warm up the audience, and you're going to do the technical stuff later. Crudely, what we're trying to do is we're trying to put 90 kilos of live weight on every tonne of dry matter we've available on the farm. That includes grass and meal coming in. And then we want those cows producing 85% of their body weight in kgs of milk solids. We're not quite there, we're near it, and that's where we're feeling. It's very easy to drive your stocking rate too high, and all you're doing is the last cows then are really only getting maintenance on the farm. They're not getting enough output, and you drive it further, and all you're doing is you're effectively buying in all that extra feed. So Donald will do stocking rate a lot better than I could ever do it. We want to achieve high grass utilisation, so grow a lot of it and then get it down the cow's throat. How do you do that? You focus on grass budgets, you focus on getting your grazing residuals right. Kevin will talk more about that. It's all about attempting to graze out the paddock right every time. You're not going to get it done every time, but you attempt to do it every time. If you don't get it done, you know you have an issue in that paddock that you have to come back in and correct. You either come back in earlier and get it done, or you say, I keep it in the head that if there's anything to go for bales, a paddock, we try to do that. The issue is focusing on residuals. We want to convert that grass then into milk solids to get paid. How do you do that? You have high fertility, high EBI stock. And we've dealt with that already. And then a disciplined budget of control. Let's be honest, if anyone knows me, I'm probably the most undisciplined person in the world. I'd still be probably putting together a bit of this talk last night. But we have a board, and I would suggest to you all need a board. Even at family farm level, you bring a colleague on, you make sure your wife is on it, because she's the only one that's going to keep some little discipline on all ye males, and in the reverse here for all ye women and daughters, you keep the husband on to keep a bit of discipline in this. To be honest, if we didn't have a board, I don't think I would be producing a budget in November for the following year and redrafting it in December, presenting it to a board in December, they adjusting it and saying we're not happy with it, and we signing off on a budget in early January. But because we have a board, that's given us the discipline to do it. If we get a chance, Chairman, I think it'd be worth asking Kevin, how are we actually budgeting? Because Caroline yesterday gave a super talk on budgeting, and we are attempting to do what she's doing. If you could ask Kevin, don't ask me. So we do an annual budget, we break it down into quarters, we monitor on quarters. Okay, so the results. We got the waffle in the background, the results, and as I said, there are partners behind it. A lot of figures. I think the technical term is going to be busy up there. So we'll start on the left-hand side and we'll work along. I didn't want to be flashing them all up, so we'll put them all up. They are what I would call key performance indicators off of the farm since we got in there. And 215 is out in a separate slide. So cow numbers have crept. We reported slightly different than 213. That's why it's 227. We've been reporting on average cow numbers along the way, because that's the way we generally do it in Ireland. People go onto ICBF, look at their average cow numbers. 227 was maximum cows peak or milked in 213, and it's been about that figure if you want to talk maximum cow numbers each year, 225, 227 each year. But if you average them out the way we in Ireland talk, ICBF figures will give you whatever, 215 there. Look at the grass growing. Started off around 12.25, effectively sat there, 12.25, 11.53, 12.4, sat there until the lime that was corrected in 211, particularly the K, because we were low on K. This was a beef farm, well looked after, indexes sort of 2 for peas, but a good few 1s for K, because there was a lot of silage being cut on it and silage being sold off. As they started getting corrected, we moved it up from effectively 12 up to 13.2. Milk solids per cow, not saying that every time you go into a new project you're conservative on budgeting and output, but this would really prove you should be. Yes, there were heifers. Yes, anyone in the room here, if we said we're bringing in all heifers, they'd say they'll do 300 kilos of milk solids a cow the first year. They didn't. That's what they did. 265, they've crept 326, 354, 381. Kilos of milk solids a hectare, which is a factor of stocking rate, and we're doing that, as you see, has crept along. 6-week calving. You buy in cows, you have a budget. I know if I'm buying cows what I'd like in the morning, I'd like all crossbred, high EBI, over 190 EBI cows, all calving in February. You just don't get them for your budget. So what we got, we were happy with, but that ended up with a 6-week calving rate of 58%. Kevin Ahern has driven 58% up to 79% in 14 and higher in 15. How has he done it? The cows that came in had fertility. Their calving interval has sat around 367 days. So the cows that came in, wherever they calved the 1st of March, the first year, they more or less have calved the 1st of March every other year. More or less. The heifers, all are coming in that first 6 weeks. We're cross if they don't all calf down in the first 3 weeks, because we're synchronising, but we'll accept the heifer calving down to 6 weeks. So the original herd has stayed calving, where it was calving when it came in, and the other heifers came in and stayed and doing it. That sounds very simple. Obviously, there's a lot of management work in making sure that happens. MT rate is sitting on the single figures, so they're doing what it says in the tin. The reason I put up cell count here is it's one of the things of taking in heifers, or if you're taking in a mixed herd, you have to have a ruthless policy on how you're going to deal with cell count, and you get it sorted out early. Because if not, I don't farm, but I listen to what people are telling me. And one thing people will tell me is if they're running a high cell count, they dread milking, because they're afraid when they go down what extra cow's mastitis that evening. If you don't get that sorted out early, it's creating a bad morale around the place. The whole culture goes wrong and other things start slipping. I would put a big emphasis on keeping your cell count right all the time. We look at where it went in 15, average milk 222, peak we were milking 225, stocking rate gone up a bit, Grass grown, gone to 15.6. As I said, a great year. I didn't put grass utilised in any of the other ones, but we're sitting somewhere, that's a backward calculation as you know, we're sitting somewhere between the 80 and 83%. So we're attempting to grow a lot of grass and get it grazed. 6-week calving rate has jumped to a 93. Touch wood, we're on target probably, and no, touch wood and say nothing for this year, that's safer. Empty rate of 7%, they're doing what they said in the 10, and the kilos of milk solids per cow are gone to 425, or kilos of milk solids per hectare, 1250. We're hitting the targets we set ourselves, and they're getting there. They put out, the year before, restricted with quota, once a day from the 1st of August, 14 was much the same output as 13. Last year we drove on to a little over 93,000 kilos of milk solids. Listening to Dunnaberry yesterday, in future there's no reason why that farm won't hit an initial target we had of 100,000 kilos of milk solids with improved breeding and greater efficiency of cows. I suppose you're the money people. I say it was in this type of conference I heard what that ROC and ROE mean. Chairman, you'll probably have to explain that afterwards, because all that old technical stuff on money, I can't make head, ass or tail of it. Total receipts coming in, look, it crept every year. It's been driven, in fairness, it's been driven by increased output and very good milk prices. Our milk price in 14 was 44.8. Our milk price this year is 35.8. We're down 10 cents. Milk output got up, but we're pulling serious milk price. Total expenses, as they are there, 213 maybe is the blip there. That was our fodder shortage crisis in Ireland. We fed more silage in spring. We bought silage in spring. We fed more meal. Just on feeding, and it came up yesterday, we don't actually feed any meal to cows, but we feed a fair bit of meal per hectare because we feed the grass wedge. So we are willing to put in meal at any stage of the year. If we don't have enough on our grass wedge, we'll feed 5 kilos of meal for 10 days to cows. But the key thing is we'll pull it out as fast as we put it in as soon as grass recovers. So we don't feed cows, we feed the grass wedge. Cash flow, milk price, we were down on output the first year. Milk price saved us, you could say. We were effectively breaking even in year 10 and 11 and 12. Does this thing work? It does. If I put it up here, will you see it behind? What? No. Oh, shit. All right, okay. Chairman, can we improve the technology that can cope with mavericks like me? So I have to do it here. So, now I have no microphone. I know you can't see me behind the podium. So in effect, that's as near as damn it to zero. So interest only loan initially, so we had no cash no capital repayments in the first 2 years. Then after that, when output kicked in and milk price stayed steady, thrown off significant money afterwards. Looking at return on capital, which is the big thing to seize the project on, they're the figures, you know, a 1, a 2, a minus, an 18, a 17. If you do it over our lifetime, we're sitting around a 14% return on capital. The equity is all a factor of how much money equity is in and how much is it leveraged as regards borrowings. So the return on equity will always be better when you're going up, but it'll be poorer as you're coming down too. So all it's doing is multiplying it up. So you're doing well, obviously you're making big return on equity. They're the background figures on it. Let's look at 15, where we dropped, as I said, 10 cents a litre. We do our budget every year and we monitor as we go along. We pride ourselves, and that's the team, that's Kevin and me, we pride ourselves on coming in near the budget. Of course there's items go way up, and then we save it on other items. But if you're doing it on a quarterly basis, there's an opportunity to adjust as the year goes on. Going back and looking at your figures at the end of the year is lovely academic exercise, but has no practical function for keeping on budget as you go along. Looking at 15, which is more up to date, so an average of 35.8 cents a litre at a 4.4% butter fat and a 3.7% protein, brought in that type of money. They're actually not written in the book, because when we did the book, if anyone is that interested, about the only thing that's missing are those figures, because we didn't have them at the time of the book. Livestock sales, 72,000. That is help. a crude figure is livestock sales is bringing in around 10% of your income. That's bringing in about 17% of your income. That is really driven by Kevin, who is very slow to sell animals out of the farm without adding value to them. So we sold calves last year that we shouldn't have kept because it created a lot of labour on the farm. It created a lot of pressure on housing. He brought heifer calves on to 12 weeks old and made money on doing them. So all those type of things are helping in there. The other big thing that's helping is if you can sell cows, surplus cows that are in calf, you're making more money than cows that are not in calf. Fertility drives profit. And that's what we're saying every year as regards livestock sales. Labour is 68. Unfortunately, Kevin is not getting all that. That's our total labour bill last year. We have a land lease, as I said. We're totally leasing the land. You can argue we're paying enough for it, but that's our deal. We're paying €185 an acre in West Cork. You won't get small bits of land in West Cork for that amount of money, but equally, you probably, to do a 15-year deal, you will get that. Contract rearing is significant. We're rearing more heifers than we need because we're filling up the contract rearer's farm. That's the reality of it. We're probably making a small bit of money on contract rearing, selling surplus heifers, but not a lot. But we're filling his farm. Our choice is we give him less heifers and then he'll take in someone else's heifers. So we're trying to minimise our disease risk by giving him extra heifers. We think it's about an income neutral job. Bank payments about 46. Total expenses 359. Our budget last year to spend was 360 and a half. So we came in within €1,000 of budget by monitoring all the time. Cash flow 107. Our profit will be a little bit higher than that because the profit is, there's inventory change to come into profit and then we're taking off our depreciation off of that 820,000. Well, the capital items of that 820,000, in other words, the non-livestock items, we're depreciating that. Giving us this year, again, a good return on a reduced milk price. So what have we learned to date? And Chairman, I'm really finishing up at this stage. What we've learned to date is, and I suppose this is what it was set out to do, to give confidence. On a pasture-based system, it can repay all its resources. In other words, we're fully paying for land, we're fully paying for labour, and we're making our bank repayments, and we're giving a return on capital. It can do that. Cows, get the right cows for your system. The reason I put crossbreds up here, yes, they were high fertility, yes, they're EBI, half of them are crossbreds. So I'm not saying you can't do this with high EBI non-crossbreds. What I'm saying is we have done it with crossbreds. In general, the cows that have went out not in calf each year, those 9, 13, 9, 7% gone out each year. In general, they have gone out. If you look at, analyse what cows went out, they were the cows with the lower index for fertility. Not saying that we had gorgeous crossbreds that went out with 100 EBI for fertility. You do a crossbreeding effect, that was probably 170 or 80 real EBI for fertility, but they still went out. But in general, the animals we lost were the lower ones for fertility. We had a policy from day one of producing crossbred replacement heifers. So at this stage, the herd is a third black and white, a third Norwegian red crosses, and a third Jersey crosses. So it has moved more towards a crossbred herd. And that's why I'm saying that's the herd that produced the results you're looking up. Grass, we've targeted consistent residuals. Early on when we used to get people in, they used to be shocked at what we were grazing. We even had a couple of sort of panic station people that were in claiming we were grazing to less than the cows could eat. And I said, you can't graze to less than the cows could eat because we're not cutting it for them and putting it into the mouth. So if they graze to there, they grazed. I would say you should be grazing in spring to 3.5 centimetres and not any lower. Because if you're going too low, that's your indication you're underfeeding cows. If you're grazing to 2.5, they can't go lower. So you have no way of knowing are you underfeeding cows. In spring management to me is very easy. You do your spring rotation. I'm sorry, no, Chairman, I've diverted a bit, but this is good stuff, like. Oh yeah. No, just in case he's going to interrupt me, this is good stuff. We get into woeful complications in spring about working out how much cows can eat and all that. Lads, we can't do it. And if we could do it, you wouldn't have the time to do it. You do a spring rotation planner which says how much hectares you have to give a cow per day, or you can give that week. You put the cows out in the morning and you give it. If they've it all eaten, they cannot go out that night. They can't go out that night. If they haven't it all eaten, they can go out that night. If weather conditions are bad, you have to manage it as regards 3 hours on, 3 hours off. If they go out that night and they still haven't eaten out their allocation, you're giving them too much grub inside. What's the first thing you pull? Pull silage. What's the next thing you pull? You pull ration. How do you know you're adequately feeding them? You're grazing to 3.5. If you're grazing to 4, you're leaving valuable material after you outside in the field. If you're grazing to 2.5, you're pushing them under too much pressure every day. You can graze to 2.5 some days. Very simple. Don't ever get into this thing like scientists like me would attempt to do until Kevin says, John, cop yourself on. You can't go working out exactly what cows are eating. Don't get into that. Come up with practical stuff all the time. A policy statement, a rant, over. Okay. Consistent residuals, that's what we were saying. Soil fertility, we dealt with it. Financial discipline. Come up with some way that's going to force you to have the financial discipline if you know you're not good at that yourself. Do the budget. And to do the budget, no, I leave it because we might come up with questions. To do the budget, it's sitting down and going through each item. Monitor it regularly then, because there's no point looking back at the end of the year. That's the man that's doing the work, I'm doing the talking. Thank you.
Okay. Kevin, could you please come up and join us? And John will say that while Kevin is coming up, could you just confirm a figure you didn't even mention, 1250 kgs of milk solids per hectare? Am I right in thinking that was 150 kgs of meal that you used? And I'll toss John's question over to Kevin. In what way do you actually achieve your budget? How do you go about budgeting and so on?
Yeah. I'll answer the meal. We actually don't tell anyone how much meal we're feeding, because we are in a politically sensitive area. If you look at the top heading there, go back one, go back on the slide. Each one of those are good co-ops. Their objective is to have the most profitable farmers within their co-op area, and I totally agree and respect that. But equally, we'll always be confused that we want to shift a bit of product. So they'd be looking in at us and saying, lads, you're not a great example to our suppliers. You're not feeding a lot of stuff. So we generally don't boast or say at all what we fed. I can never get the figure right, because whatever figure I say, I'm going to be 3 kilos wrong. So Kevin, you can tell him how much.
Yeah, that's about right, Michael, about 150 kilos last year.
Yeah, for 1250 kgs. In terms of doing the basics right, it's a bloody good story. Kevin, on budgeting?
Yeah, I suppose John touched on it, and it was touched on yesterday. Budgets, it's back to basics every year. I suppose John and myself met this morning, and we said maybe back to zero is the best way to do a budget. Start with zero on the budget. Some of you mightn't have been here yesterday. It was a fantastic presentation. But we got through every item that is coming in the gate and see, do we really need it, or can we get it cheaper, or whatever, really, like.
It's exactly as Caroline said yesterday, and my only function or my only use in doing it, again, it's discipline. This man is doing it. The only thing I do is I sit down and say, Kevin, vaccines, what are we going to do? And he says, this and this. I said, what's the cost of that? He'll know it in his head. And then we argue, can we squeeze it a bit, or something goes out, and we do each item. It's a pain in the neck sometimes, but you've got to make the time. It's exactly like Caroline was saying yesterday. Maybe you need a facilitator in, because if you don't, because we challenge each other in doing it, and then we present it to a board, and if you know Padraig French, he's going to challenge us again about, do we really need those? And because of that, you're fine-tuning it. But it has to be your budget. If someone imposes a budget on you, as Caroline said yesterday, it's not your budget. You take ownership of it. So once we have ownership of it, we'll say, we're going to make it work. Because the joke always is, we put in probably 250, 300 kilos of ration. We can feed that. And we say to Padraig, that's our target. We're going to get it into them somehow, even if it's intravenous. But it's not a target. We are budgeting on average conditions, that's what we'll need. And then we pride ourselves if we can beat each of them figures. And that's what that's what you do.
Okay, question down there. Yeah.
This on, yeah. John Burchell here, family farmer, and not farming too far away from Kevin and his team. Doing a fantastic job. I keeps an eye on him every morning, and he keeps an eye on me. I have two questions.
I'm up first, John, always.
I know you are, yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, but I have the cows back out in the paddock before you. I gave up all this joking New Year's Day and I'm back to it now again. Anyway, 2 questions. One, and I suppose there's a lot more discussion, first of all, about your figures, anything like that. But moving forward, a question for Kevin. The fact that John mentioned you're in the same general locality on the island as Clonakilty. When do you think you're going to, or will you contemplate moving down the clover inclusion route? And a question for John is, when is Kevin going to get more pay?
Let him answer that one first, and I'll answer.
Very good.
No, John, yeah, clover, like we can't turn our back on 70 kilos as the way, or 60 kilos as the way I look at it. We really have to consider it. There's a lot of milk solids there that could be sold out the gate, I think. So there's a few minor details that need to be tweaked out versus this bloat and maybe too much clover taking over the ground cover. So I think once we've answered, we can go ahead with it.
Okay. Could I ask the speaker, whoever's asking questions, just to stand up, we'll say, just to assist the panel to actually see where you are. Yeah.
As a quick question, how many grazing days do you manage, and how long is your lactation?
Grazing days, we go out from the 1st of February until maybe the 15th of November, bar a really wet 12 hours that they might have to stay in. I think last year, off the top of my head, it was 282 or 283 days milk was lactation linked.
Yeah. Question?
Yeah. 2 quick questions. The bank repayments, 47,000. How much of that is capital? And the second question, what's the milk price you put in this year's budget?
First one was...
No, I have the first one. The second one.
What milk price did you put in for this year?
So interest in that quickly is around 10,000. So what, 46 minus the 10, roughly. I can get you exact, but I'm near enough to a couple of hundred. Milk price for this year, we budgeted on 30, wasn't it? Yeah, we budgeted on 30 this year. Now, at another public meeting, we put in 30 and we got accused we were talking down the price of milk. We're not talking down the price of milk. We think, I don't know where this 6% increase in milk prices coming out of from other quarters. We think if we can hold for the year, so we're budgeting on 30. We generally budget on milk price conservative enough, because it keeps a bit of manners and discipline on us. If we had budgeted in 14 that we were going to have a 44.8, I'm sure we'd have invented ways of spending it. So we generally will budget, so we will budget lower than what we think milk price will be, because it keeps a bit of manners and discipline on us. I mean, last year, if any of you have been down to Shinnok, this man put up some sort of monument in front of the milking parlour. No, you haven't been down, yeah. No, it's sort of an in-house joke.
Yeah. Okay, question down there.
It was a picture of John, lads. Yeah.
Liam Hanran, Doonbeg, County Clare. I'd just like to ask the question about, he's mentioned that he borrowed as much money as he possibly could. Would you like to have borrowed more money? And could you also comment on the size of the loan on a lease farm?
Yeah, we did borrow as much as we could, meaning if we could have got away without putting in that 260,000 equity, we'd have been happier with more borrowings as it happened, because our charge on that equity is dearer than our borrowings. Our cheapest source of finance is actually borrowings. That was fixed interest stuff with Ulster Bank, in fairness, back in 2011. That interest rate is very good. It's somewhere around 2.9, maybe 3% at the moment. Sorry, I tell a lie. It's about 2.5%. If we had borrowed more, we would have spent it on the farm. You see the outcomes, you see the cash coming out. So the consequence of that would have been we'd have had more capital to set up the farm, we would have a lower return on capital. So no, we were trying to set up the farm as cost effective, or crudely as cheap as we could do it, and that then put less pressure on what we needed to make each year to give us our return. What I meant is, of the 820, we would have borrowed more if we could have, and had less equity in it.
Okay, the next question. Could I ask a question, thinking of people who are about to do something similar, what would you do differently if you were starting again with both Kevin and John?
I don't know, how would we do different? I suppose John touched on it earlier. whether you'd buy all cows or all heifers. If it was me involved in another project, I would definitely go with all heifers. I think you can, as John touched on the cell count, but you can also train heifers to what you want to do, as in grazing residuals. Whereas if you buy in herds of cows, maybe they're not used to grazing down to 3.5 to 4 centimeters. I think you can train your herds for what you need to do. So.
Yeah, and John, if I put the question to you, I will say that for many years, a superb extension person, since you've actually got very actively involved, what have you learned?
How to work a chainsaw. In the big storm there in 14, a few trees came down, and I thought it'd have been remiss of me not to help him tidy him up. So I'm still burning them. I don't know. I'm not sure. This is awful now. Farmer friends of mine would say it has put manners on me since I got involved above in Shinnok. It's meant as a compliment. I'm not actually taking it as a compliment, because I think in this game your main job is you're observing. And you're observing and you're picking up all those messages that 85% of what I know, or the reason I'm standing up here, is what I've learned off of farmers. Like, you didn't know what I learned off a book, Mike. So I would, yes, I had a lot learned before I went into that, and if you even hear there now, I'm getting slightly emotional in my voice, because that's genuine. So I suppose I've learned some of the realities of what you have to do on the ground. It's not as easy doing on the ground as it is in theory. Example being what I said about grazing in spring, but I'd have distilled that down from what farmers would have said to me over the years. I think it's meant as a compliment, but I don't think I've learned how to work the chainsaw, genuine. I don't think I've learned, sorry, I have learned an awful lot more, but I had a lot of it learned before I went there.
Okay. I'll take one last question. We can, after Donald's finished, we'll say that, that we, if anybody wants to ask extra questions, you can do it then. So.
Yeah, I'm not 100% familiar in the climate down here, but I was just wondering, was the maths done on actually taking the stocking rate back instead of putting up the infrastructure of the building and outwintering cows on keel, or was that ever an option?
Yes, okay. Where would you do it? We were able to get finance. I'm involved with a number of people that have gone that route, because basically they can't get finance. They're not able to source finance to put any building up. So what does it needs be? So you have to do what you have to do. It can be hard to lease ground in the part of the country we are in and outwinter, because people looking in what they're like. If you have your own ground, you have more control of it. If you're leasing ground and you come through a January or December like we've come through, it's hard enough to keep renewing leases, because inevitably we're doing a certain amount of ground damage. You get to the money you can get, and you make the best use of it that you can get. And there are people running that system because they can't access enough capital to put up a wintering pad or to put up roofless cubicles or something.
Okay, it's a great story, we'll say that, fantastic extension, we'll say that, and for anybody who's not receiving the Shinnok weekly newsletter, I very much urge you, will say that it's the best I've seen in terms of, we'll say that it's really easy to understand, and it's a tremendous prompt list to question in terms of what you're doing in your own place. I know there's one or two